Hey everyone, it's Bob McCraney with Texas Pride Realty, brokered by Home Smart Stars. Today we have Rowan Murphy with us. We're doing the Flee Red States podcast. Rowan has an amazing story of being who they are, where they are, and living outside the U.S., inside the U.S. And we just want to invite Rowan on. Rowan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi.
Mhm.
So, I am a bit of a late bloomer LGBTQ member, I guess is what you would call it. I realized at 50 that my lifelong issues with my gender had not just been, a trauma response or some form of body dysmorphia, but that there was actually a lot more to it. And there were some things that led to me finally having that final push that I needed to figure myself out. At the time, I had left my corporate job, which had gotten quite toxic. And so I was a little bit kind of at loose ends, if you want to say it that way. I was training to be a life and health coach, and I was trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life. So, as part of that, I decided to explore a little bit more closely what was happening with, the issues I had with my body and with my gender. And it took me a while to actually get the help I needed because, interestingly, in the US, and I don't know if that's true elsewhere in the world, but getting assistance with gender related issues like to transition or to get the care that you need to figure yourself out, many organizations have an age cutoff, and
Really?
most of them are below 30.
I did not know that. Say that again, please. I want to understand that completely.
Yeah. So I reached out because I figured, okay, I need to find help to figure out, am I actually transgender? Is that's what's happening? So I reached out to different organizations that are available for people with gender issues, gender-related issues. And the organizations that were easily found on the internet were all focused on youth. So at the time I lived in Delaware, so I reached out to some local ones, gender clinics and things like that. And everywhere I turned, the response was, well, we only work with youth. Our age cutoff is 26, or our age cutoff is 21, or our age cutoff is 30. You're 50 years old, you're like far outside of our age range, so we can't help. And so
You
that
know,
actually was a journey that went on
wow.
for weeks and weeks.
Most every trans person I know transitioned way after 30. It's not even like didn't start the process and understanding that that's who they were until after 30. So
Yeah.
that's worrisome.
It was worrisome. And I did speak to some folks about it because I said, like, I understand. I mean, let me get this on the record, right? Yes, our trans youth is the number one priority in needing help, right? They need all the support that they can get because when you're young like that and you're trying to figure yourself out and you have a society that's slowly but surely turning against you, you have to have that support system. But that should not be at the exclusion of everyone else.
Right.
And the fact that it took me months literally to find a mental health provider who was able to give me you know, the support that I needed and the assistance in figuring myself out should not have taken that long, especially because my mental health was in a very dark place. I was not doing well, at all. Um, and my experience with, psychiatric care before that had always been that when I brought up my gender as a problem, it was explained away with as a trauma response because I've experienced a lot of trauma in my youth. It was explained away with, body dysmorphia. They use terms like cognitive dissonance. Like there were all of these terms that they threw around that I was like, well, I guess they know what they're talking about. I'm not a psychiatrist, right? But then as I was doing my training as a life coach, that required a lot of introspection, and a lot of work on myself. And with that, it opened up more and more things that led me to understand that, I have dealt with the trauma. I have dealt with a lot of these things, but this piece of it is still there, and I'm still miserable. Um, and so, like I said, I reached out to different places. I did end up finding one person that I worked with, a counselor, actually finally found a gender wellness clinic was what it was called in the state of Delaware that I could reach out to. And initially they were like, yeah, you might be waiting a while. Again, because most of the other organizations are focused on youth. So these places that work with older people usually have longer wait lists. But I was lucky. I actually was able to get in fairly quickly. And it didn't take long actually to get a diagnosis for gender dysphoria because we combed through all of the things that had happened, throughout my life as they pertain to my gender. And the counselor was like, it's pretty obvious, and I'm surprised that none of your prior counselors were able to figure it out. But on the flip side, most therapists and counselors are not trained on LGBTQ issues. Therefore, they go with the things that are in their toolkit, the things that they know, and that they're familiar with, and they're not necessarily going to make that jump. Particularly because if you think about it, transgender people make up like what 1% of the population. So it's not like it's a super common thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, between what counselors had told me over the past decades and the representation in the media, if you think about it, when you see transgender people, the vast majority of the time, they are trans women. Like, trans men hadn't really been something that had been on my radar at all. Until I would say maybe Elliot Page. That was the first time that there was a like prominent example in the media for me that I, was familiar with. Before that, I mean, I don't know, there probably were other trans men or trans mask people in the media, in shows and things, but not necessarily in things that I've watched. Um, like I found out later that Shameless had a trans male character, but it was not a show that I'd ever watched before. So,
That's, if I can interject here, that's
yeah,
why representation is so important.
yep,
If there is representation in one movie, well, okay, let's hope people saw it.
yeah,
If there's representation in six movies, there's a much better chance of people seeing it. And I'm not
yes,
saying every movie has to have everyone in it, but when you have representation and it permeates the culture, there's a better chance of seeing yourself somewhere in there.
right,
I can list you four or five shows where I went at different times in my life where I went, oh my God, I'm on TV or I'm on the this is me.
yeah,
And it wasn't necessarily, and I'm sure we would all have different lists.
yeah,
It's important that we have representation and that it
yes,
vary because well, just as a cis gay male, I'm not going to see every cis gay male on screen and go, oh, that's me, because
right.
I'm going to be different than them.
No, you're absolutely right. You're
So
absolutely right.
finding that representation is is brilliant, and you finding it where you found it was the right time and the right place for you.
Well, I'll tell you what, the actual thing that made it click for me, because the other problem I had was that most trans characters that I had seen on the media were what you would consider straight. So it would be a trans woman attracted to men or a trans man attracted to women. For me, I was still like attracted to men. So what does that mean for me, right? And it wasn't until I found a book written by an author who was a gay trans man that I
Mhm.
actually felt seen, that I felt, oh, okay. So someone else exists who is kind of like me, right? In that way. And Bob, you know that I worked on a book recently where media representation is kind of a very important component. I wrote my own story for the book, where I kind of tried to illustrate that. Like I,
Let
there's,
me highlight the book that you are the editor of called Why
oh,
Are We Like This?
I would say
And
author,
Stories of
please.
Transformation.
I'm not just the editor, I also wrote a lot of it.
Pardon, excuse me. You wrote a lot of it. It says it right there on the bottom, editor and wrote a lot of it with George Hightower. Let's
Yeah,
mention George as well. This book, thank you for this book, and I've got a little segment in it as well, and I'm
yes,
so
indeed.
proud to have been part of this. I love the spine, very nicely done. I'm sorry, not the spine, the edge.
Yeah.
And tell us more about the book and what it's about.
Yeah. So the book is about, it relates to a TV show called Heartstopper. It was produced by
Mhm.
Netflix. And it is a very sweet LGBTQ inclusive teenage rom-com dramedy type show. And it is very unique in that A, it has the most inclusive representation I have ever seen in any television show, and B, in that it does not leverage the usual LGBTQ storylines to drive artificial drama, trauma, um, or any of the things that the stereotypes and the stigmas that you see commonly in the media for LGBTQ characters. So you have an inclusive cast, you have a very hopeful and sweet story that normalizes queer existence, and all of a sudden, you have this worldwide impact where people across the globe, any age, any walk of life, related to it all of a sudden. And definitely people who are outside of the target audience, right? Because the target audience really initially was intended to be LGBTQ youth. And, part of the fact that, there isn't over-sexualization and violence and things like that in it was because it needed to reach that young audience. Once you introduce certain factors, your TV rating goes up, right? So there was a deliberate effort. But a side effect of that was that people felt like we've never seen ourselves represented like this before.
We always saw ourselves being represented as the traumatic story of having to come out. There was never just like, oh, I'm here. It
Right.
was never like that. And we
Yep.
probably didn't really get that until maybe 10, 15 years ago. Every
Right.
story we had was either about someone coming out or someone who's HIV positive, or we had several stories of male to female transitioning. I
Right.
cannot name one movie or one documentary off the top of my head about female to male transitioning.
Mhm.
I can't.
And
We
here
don't
we
have
had
that.
in season two here we had a non-binary character who
Yeah.
transitioned from girl to non-binary, which was like, yeah, there were just pieces in it that were absolutely incredible, right?
So can I interject one point here? We
Mm,
started out by saying this was a young adult rom-com, and it is because the characters generally are. However, there are LGBTQ teachers, there
yes.
are people, and for somebody of my generation, uh, we never had this.
Yeah.
We had Philadelphia.
Hmm.
We had where Tom Hanks, spoiler, Tom Hanks dies. And then we had Soap, where Billy Crystal is called the F slur every
Yeah.
couple of episodes. We had Eddie Murphy
Yeah.
using F slurs as comedy. We had HIV AIDS just pummel us
Yeah.
and that generation. So to have a show where nobody gets the crap beat out of them,
Yeah.
nobody becomes a drug addict, nobody catches HIV, nobody becomes a sex worker. We're waiting for that shoe to drop, and we're going,
Yeah.
oh my God, they're showing a hopeful
Yeah.
outcome.
And
So
that's
for people
even
of our
with like,
generations, just
it's not
love
all
that show.
sunshine and rainbows, right? Because there are issues
No,
addressed in there about
right,
bullying, for instance, right? There is an instance of sexual assault, right? There's a kind of coercion in there, but you also have mental health issues that are being addressed, and transphobia
exactly.
and homophobia. So all of those themes are still because they are part of the fabric of our lives, right? But they are handled in a very careful way and with a very hopeful and optimistic lens.
Yes, yes,
And that's what sets it apart. But yeah, so what happened was, to get back to like why is there a book? Um, so I for the past 3 years I kept wondering like what is it about this particular show, that reaches so deeply into people and particularly people who are older and didn't fully realize that they actually are part of the LGBTQ community. Because there's been media exposure, right? I mean, we've had representation in many other shows, like there's Schitt's Creek with the bisexual representation in the gays, which is very nicely done in that show as well. But like, why was it that this particular one reached the way it did and affected the way it did? Because I had firsthand knowledge from new friends I made through the fandom. There was a woman leaving a toxic 18-year marriage because she felt like I deserve better. There were women in their 40s realizing they're bisexual or realizing they're asexual. Um, there were a couple of folks that were starting to question their gender. There were people who decided the life that I'm living right now, just barely getting by, is not enough. I deserve more. It was just wide ranging. It wasn't just about LGBTQ identities, it was about wanting more out of life. And so I did talk to a friend of mine about it, George Hightower, who's the co-author in the book. And he had like the same ideas I had, which was, we should really collect stories and put them in a book. Now, granted, he had maybe a little different vision than I had because for me, what was very important was to touch on the media representation um, and how it influences how we see ourselves and to what degree we're willing to explore our own identities. And so that's why you'll see when you read it, there are multiple chapters in it, and each has a little introduction that speaks to how that particular segment that's being represented in the stories for that part of the book, how media representation has influenced them. For instance, mental health, right? There's a chapter in it where people wrote about how the example that they saw through Heartstopper has encouraged them to get help for their mental health problems. Why hasn't another TV show made them do that? So I started to wonder, like, what is it about how mental health is represented in the media? And you'll actually find there are similar themes with it as there are with LGBTQ populations because there's stigma, there's stereotyping, how, OCD is something funny. It's not funny. There's nothing funny about OCD. However, it gets ridiculed when you look at, certain
right.
TV shows. And so having in a television show a male character ask for help with his mental health, that was huge because statistically speaking, men are not very likely to seek help for mental health. And part of that is because of stigma, and part of that is because it's seen as a sign of weakness. But here you have a male character set that example. And that's pretty powerful. So it's just, throwing out some things that I observed, but that I ended up wanting to have in there. And so going back full circle, the media representation, the way it was done in this particular show was what helped me have that final push to say, I need to figure my shit out. Sorry, my stuff out. And I need the help. And I think I'm trans, but I'm not sure because I still like men. So, that's what kind of pushed me to say, let's get to the bottom of it because I can't keep living this way.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah,
That's quite a journey.
it was.
Um, let's bring it back to the theme that we tend to talk about is, LGBTQ people trying to find a place
Yeah,
either within the United States or outside of the United States
yeah,
where they feel comfortable, embraced, welcomed.
yeah,
We talk a lot about Portugal and Spain and Mexico and Uruguay and the UK and Ireland.
yeah,
And I know you're a bit of a world traveler,
yes,
originating from, if I can divulge where you're originally
yeah.
from,
Germany.
Germany,
Yep.
and having been to the United States and been all around the world, where are you feeling welcomed and embraced right now?
So it's a loaded question, really, in
I'm
today's day
sorry.
and age. No, that's fine, but that's why I'm here to talk about that, right? So, I was born and raised in Germany and moved to the United States in 1998. I was 27 at the time, and I kept my German citizenship for quite some time. It wasn't until 2013 that I said, I'm working here, I'm paying taxes here, I'm paying Social Security, all of those things, but I can't vote in a presidential election. So, screw the green card and all the renewal fees, let me just get my citizenship. What I didn't realize at the time was Germany had changed the laws since I had left. So I lost my German citizenship in the process,
Mm.
which, at the time I didn't realize it. And by the time I did realize it, I bitterly regret it. Um, because as I was discovering my true identity and starting my medical transition and starting to feel the absolute best I ever have in my entire life about the way I look, the way I feel, about everything as it comes to this shell that makes up, my exterior expression, matching with what I feel inside. At the same time, all of a sudden, I'm noticing that the US is turning more and more and more against people like me. And I was like, there must be some kind of curse, right? Just as I'm feeling happy about about me and about everything in my life, now I have to see the country that I am now a citizen of start to turn more and more and more increasingly against transgender rights.
Can I ask what year that was, roughly?
So I saw my transition in 2022.
Okay.
And I had already started to follow kind of, I knew that there was some sentiment, there was debate about trans identities and the validity of them and all of that. But it hadn't really reached, a point of true concern at that point. Um, but then throughout 2022, I saw more and more anti-trans bills being introduced across the entirety of the United States, particularly in the South. And I was like, okay, this is not a good trend.
And let's to be clear, when you say more and more trans bills, we're not talking like 10 or 20. We're talking hundreds.
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 Yes, hundreds. And it kept getting increasingly more every month. Um, And so I was like, okay, by the end of 2022, I said, this is a trend that I don't like to see. The year turned into 2023, and already starting in the first month of that year, it got worse, way, way worse. And then there were rumblings. I don't remember when the first rumblings I heard about Project 2025, but it was sometime in 23 that I heard about it and started to read it. And I was like, so growing up in Germany, what you have to understand is I grew up in Germany in the 70s and 80s. This was before the Berlin Wall came down, so the still Allied forces, the curriculum in schools was still heavily influenced by the Allied forces. Um, so we literally every year in history had to learn all the gory details about what happened in the Third Reich and leading up to World War II. Um, this included videos of actual things happening at concentration camps, which would leave me physically ill. Trips to concentration camps and prisons and stuff. I mean, it was literally, you know how they stuff a goose, to get it to have a fatty liver. That's how it felt. Like history was literally crammed down. So seeing Project 2025 was alarming to say the least, because it was literally like a page out of the Nazi playbook. And I tried telling people, and nobody wanted to hear it, nobody cared. And I was like, okay, if this is the kind of society that lives here, I won't ever feel safe. If people can turn a blind eye or literally say that, yeah, it's, rumor mongering and, it's never going to happen, not in this day and age, and not taking it seriously, that to me was like a huge red flag, right? So
Hmm.
that's when I started to look at like what other places in the world are there, and come to find, that it's immigrating to another country. Like since I left Germany, it's gotten way harder. Um, the restrictions on different visas in different countries is insane because I looked at Spain because I do like it there. I've been to Spain many a time and they are fairly LGBTQ friendly, but I don't speak the language fluently, right? So to me that was kind of all right, maybe. Um, and in Germany, unfortunately, you start seeing similar trends with the AfD and, that right wing kind of on the uprise. So besides, I have a lot of trauma in Germany, so I don't particularly care to go back there. So I started looking at places like the UK and Ireland because I have friends in both places. Um, but the problem is, even if you can immigrate into a country relatively easily, there's the matter of getting gender affirming care, right?
Yes.
So,
Or what should be called healthcare. That's it.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for saying that. Brilliant.
And I say that because we had Cassie on way back, and she has a trans child, and they fled Texas to Uruguay.
Right.
And when we talked to her about healthcare for her child, she's like, it's just healthcare.
Yeah.
No one cares. That there's a difference between the sex assigned at birth and what how this child lives now. It's just healthcare. And I
Right.
was like,
They dropped the modifier.
people were stunned. Like she was speaking in a crowd of people, and they're just stunned. It's just healthcare. And
It
they
is.
asked her about, well, what's gay pride like? She's like, they don't, I mean, I'm not saying they don't celebrate, but it's just, you don't have, there's no reason to because you're included in everything.
Right.
Like, you know, uh, Carnival, it's just inclusive of everybody. So if you ask me about that, I don't know because everybody is just included.
Wow. And that's in Uruguay. I have not looked into that one yet.
They are one of the few countries that have protections for transgender people that have laws to protect them, not
Yeah.
just like laws saying you can live as this person, but actually laws to protect you. And that's why her
Right.
and her family chose Uruguay. They could have went to Mexico because her husband was from Mexico, but
Yeah.
she did her homework and that's where they ended up. And she is as happy as can be.
That's amazing. That's
Chile
very,
is also
very
listed, if we're
cool.
going to talk South America for a minute, why not? Chile is also listed as being very trans and LGBTQ inclusive.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I've heard Paraguay mentioned, but not nearly as well as Uruguay, and Chile is also on that list.
Hmm.
So, our there are options. Now we have the LGBTQ world map that you can refer to. I try to keep it updated.
Yeah.
There are places that we will feel more welcome and affirmed. I have kind of felt the same way. There have been times I've been like, where's the LGBTQ community? And they're like, it's just all around us. When you're
Right.
not living in an oppressed population, as an oppressed population, and
Yeah.
you disperse into the population, you don't feel the need to segment yourself as much. Yes, there's pride. Yes,
Mm,
there's, like rainbows here and there and stuff like that. But it's not like in Dallas Fort Worth or in Houston when the Montrose, where you
right.
have like people are taking up the rainbow sidewalks and we feel like we have to clump together in a herd mentality to protect ourselves, which is
Yeah.
absolutely valid.
Yeah.
When you're not like that, you're like, oh, I don't have to worry about somebody spitting on me on the street. I
Right.
can hold somebody's hand
I mean, if you look
and
at it,
not worry about who's right behind me.
we were on our way there in the US, if you think about it, in
Yes.
the last couple of decades, because when you look at cities like New York, there's no longer a gay neighborhood in New York. A lot of that has kind of disseminated, right? In Philly, where I lived for 2 years, there still is like the core, it's called the gayborhood, literally,
Mhm.
um, where there's like a concentration. But most major cities kind of it has that
Like
that
neighborhoods are dying off
yeah, it's
because the
disintegrated.
safe space is no longer needed like it was.
Exactly.
And to move to a country where you don't have to have a safe space,
Yeah,
because
I mean, brilliant.
that I still have find that very hard to comprehend.
I know.
But when I talk to people who are moving to other countries and it's like, no, I think we talked to a gentleman from Spain and I think it's Sitges is the name of the town. It's a small town, like population like 25, 30,000 people.
Yeah,
Very gay heavy population. The local churches include the gay community in all of their events. Like that,
right.
everybody is included. It
Yeah.
is not like, oh, you're not here. And is it changing? Yes. And the example I give, I grew up in a very small redneck Texas town.
Oh boy.
And I I only go back because my mother is still there. But um I was taking my mother on a little tour down memory lane and we
Hmm.
drove by my childhood best friend's house, like where he used to live. And there was a pride flag there hanging out right in the open. I'm like, oh my God. Because I never felt safe being out there. Um, but so I had to find a place where I felt safe, and that started with going to Dallas and then to Houston,
Right.
but I had a community. And when I hear people talk about, well, we just live here, like I mean, yeah, there are gay
Yeah.
people here, but
Yeah.
there's not we don't need a gay bar. We can go to
Right.
any of the bars. Like,
Right.
we're not afraid to hold hands walking down the street or to kiss in public. Like we just can.
But what's really, really sad, and it's in the UK as well. Like if you walk around like Soho, you'll notice that it's become much more mixed now. Like it's no longer this hub of concentrated queer community. But what's sad to see is, and this is happening in the US and it's starting to happen here as well, is that, we are moving backwards from the place where we didn't need those safe spaces anymore. We are moving in the opposite direction. And
Yes.
now that these safe spaces have kind of started to dissolve, is when I wish we would bring them all back because the direction that things are going, we're probably going to need them again.
I
Well,
think we'll
there's a
create those
generation
spaces again. We will create those safe spaces again if we need to.
Yeah.
there's a generation like Leslie and I came out in 92. I was probably about 4 or 5 years past the apex of HIV AIDS.
Mm,
And uh, that generation and into our generation had to learn to fight and
hmm.
protest and go out in the streets and make noise and do, good trouble, necessary trouble. Um, I think we've had a generation that under Obama and partly under Clinton, even though they did have Don't Ask, Don't Tell, things got a little bit more accepted and normalized, and we're like, yay, we're finally winning. And
Yeah.
this last administration has just slapped us. I mean,
Yeah.
the idea that we could lose everything we built,
Yeah.
and it feels harder having it taken away than winning it.
Yeah.
You know, we need to, as now we're kind of elders of the community, teach the younger generation and then let them go do the work because
Right.
we've fought the fight
Yeah.
and some of us I'm getting to an age I'm a little tired.
Yeah.
Let's share our history and let them go grow it
Yeah.
because we're going to have to get
But for
back
them to
to
do that, they have to
being out in the
first
streets.
survive. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And right now, it's starting to turn into a matter of survival, I think, for the young folks. Especially, I'm thinking from the lens of trans, but I think even young gay, bi, lesbian, whatever orientation they are starting to feel the pressure. And it's similar here in the UK, which is what's concerning me, that there are trends emerging that remind me of the United States of 2023, right? Which I've looked at, like, I wanted to explore the UK as a potential option because culturally I feel very aligned here. I mean, growing up in Europe, I've always been an Anglophile from a very young age, but I've never really felt like I fit in the US, so that didn't help. Um, and looking around here now, it almost looks like Ireland has the better, not only
Hmm.
legal protection, but also social kind of atmosphere where people really like more like live and let live. They may have opinions about like gender affirming care for minors. But even on that, they're not as heated or as split as they are here in the UK. But the problem is, while from a legal perspective, there are more protections, and from a social perspective, there's more acceptance, access to things like hormone treatment has an insanely long waiting list. Gender affirming surgeries are basically not available because there's no one there to provide them. So it's like, what do you pick? If you just look at these two, do you pick the country where, there is access to the medical care that you need, but where there is a social divide and where there's political, like, hateful rhetoric against you as a group? Or do you go to the country where, socially and legally it may be easier, but you can't get the life-saving care?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Those are the kinds of things that I've been trying to look into because here's my situation right this moment, right? I came to the UK for the launch of the book because Heartstopper is a British show and the series was filmed here and we wanted to do something to do with the filming locations. So it made sense to have a little book launch event held here in London. So I left the US in September. Went to Dublin to see my friend for a couple of weeks and then came here. And as I was hectically working on getting the book launch set up and get the book printed in time and all of this stuff, I watched with horror as the situation in the US deteriorated with the Charlie Kirk incident and
Mhm.
the fallout that followed. And then there is this talk about birthright citizenship and passport validity. And then there was the scare very recently where they said that they were going to invalidate passports for certain groups of transgender people. So my situation is this, right? My passport has a male gender marker, which was changed. It has a legal name change reflected on it. My name is Rowan, right? It's not my birth name. And it shows that I was born in Germany, because I am a naturalized citizen. So I have like all these kind of check marks against me in their view, right over there. And I worry, like, can I even go back at this point?
And I
Like,
want to bring something back. Let's talk about circle back just a minute. You became a citizen in the U.S., which gave you the right to vote. Part of Project Esther, which is the next one in line, is that you can't vote if your name does not ma on your ID does not match your birth certificate,
yeah,
which means trans people would not be able to vote.
yep.
Women who have
Women
married
who
and taken
married,
someone's and taken their spouse's last name would not be able to vote. And when they and birthright citizenship, if they remove that, that means any of us can
right,
be deported to, I guess, anywhere. I don't know where you deport someone who's a citizen. Where
yeah,
do you send them to? You can't go back to Germany. You're no longer a citizen there.
exactly.
But they certainly do not pay
I
you
have a
as a equal citizen because you're not from here and
right,
because you're trans.
right. And with all of these factors, I have a very real fear that if I were to travel back for whatever purpose, to see my kids or to, figure out my next step, that I could be detained at the airport and not
That
even
is a
make
real
it into the
fear.
country.
That is real fear. And the when I have friends that I have lots of friends who have left the United States and they come back. There is a protocol now.
Hmm.
Burner phone, burner laptop,
Yeah.
having people know exactly where you are at all times as you're entering into the United States and going through security. Did you get to your rental car? Did you get to your hotel? Like it is a real fear that something might happen.
But
Maybe they have
with even
something.
with all that, like it's the burner phone and the burner
Yeah,
laptop and all these things,
yeah,
still no guarantee that I won't
yeah,
get detained. And what good will it do me that people know that I'm not where I'm supposed to be if I'm in a fucking detention center
yeah.
in Florida or where the hell else? Sorry, I'm my language. I apologize for
You
that.
can say Florida, it's okay.
It's an
I
acceptable F
use the
word
F word.
sometimes.
Sorry. It's just it is terrifying. It is utterly terrifying. Um
Yeah.
so at this moment in time I feel utterly stuck. And then the next thing is if they actually do go down that path and start invalidating passports, then what? I'm a stateless person? What does that even mean? I mean, in reality, what would that look like?
Well,
I wouldn't be able
yeah,
to travel anywhere because at passport control in any country, it would be flagged as invalid, wouldn't it? So then what?
does that end your refugee status?
So
Yeah.
that's the other
There
thing.
are parts of Europe that are accepting LGBTQ refugees.
Yeah,
But I'm not qualified as a an attorney or whatever to talk about being a stateless person.
yeah,
But they sure do love taxing us no matter where you live.
yeah,
So what does that mean? How does this work? There's a lot of quandaries that we have to stay up nights figuring out
yeah,
that people who are in the mainstream and just voting for the economics don't understand.
yeah,
And even the people who voted for the economics are now figuring out it's their economics too.
yeah.
Um, it's it's this really kind of Orwellian thing
It is.
to consider that the state I've been living in is no longer going to be healthy for me, that the country my parents and grandparents all fought for may not be healthy for me, and that I do have the right and the privilege, yes, to get up and go somewhere else.
Yeah,
That we don't have to stay because our grandpappy fought for this farm. No, we can go wherever we want. Okay, within the 50 US or wherever else is accepting, and having
right.
that mindset shift that maybe I will get up and go somewhere that nobody in my family has ever been to before.
Yeah.
And that could be Uruguay or Spain or wherever.
I mean, I'm
And
thinking even
just
Canada because I
see what
mean,
happens when you get there. See what
yeah,
I mean, go get lost in I love to go to a new city and just kind of get lost a little bit.
yeah.
Not dangerously lost, but I mean just like, okay,
But
let's
the
turn left
problem,
on this
Bob,
street and let's walk down this alley and see what this is like.
the problem, Bob, is, when you don't have limitless financial resources and you're not allowed to work in whatever country that you're currently staying in, what are you supposed
Right.
to do? So what are you meant to do in that situation? And I'm sure that there are quite a few people that are in that
That's
boat.
where you want to look at digital nomad visas in Spain or Portugal.
Yeah, but digital nomad as what? Who do you work for then? How do you
You
find a
have to
job?
work for yourself.
You
So
have to find your way. I mean, I don't have I wish I had a push this button and it all
That's
works
just it. And I
guide for you.
think those,
Yeah,
but those are real world problems that
Mhm.
people just don't realize and don't think about. Those are
yeah.
problems faced by folks like us that um are trying to alls I want, honestly, Bob, is to live in a place where I can feel at home and where I can make a meaningful contribution to society and just be happy. That's all. Is that
It
asking a
should be
lot?
that simple. We should be able to click our heels and make that work, but it doesn't happen that way.
It should not be this difficult to achieve that. I mean, I've looked at, their student visas, obviously, but for international students, the fees are enormous. But I mean, I'd love to do something like get a degree in social work and become a social worker and actually help folks. It's the kind of thing
Hmm.
that I would love to do. But, the cheapest one that I found, I think, was still £1,500 a year, which is close to $20,000.
1,500 or 15,000, I think you meant.
I mean, pound, 1,000, yeah, fifteen
Yeah,
thousand pound
15,000, yes.
a year
Well,
was the
so
cheapest.
sometimes there are programs out there that help people who are LGBTQ plus, and especially in social work.
Hmm.
And I know he's no longer the dean of social work at the University of Houston. He is still on staff there, but they look for people
Yeah,
like yourself who
yeah.
want that opportunity, and so there may be money available if that's something that you really want. Because
Yeah,
I've
I'm
interviewed
starting to
several
look into
people to
it.
go there. Hmm?
Yeah, I'm starting to look into it. So there are some universities here because obviously you have to get your degree in social work in the country that you actually want to do it in, right?
Right.
So I couldn't do like an online degree at a US university and then work in another country with that, because the laws and regulations that dictate what social workers do are different and specific to each country. But I'm looking into a few unis in the UK, and I might also look at some in Ireland, just to see what might be available. But it's all around just a challenging process. And for me in particular, because I have a degree from, I have my high school diploma is German, right?
Hmm.
I did 6 years at uni in Germany, but then my work experience is all in the US. So like trying to cobble something together there for, to apply to apply to any higher education institution is a challenge in and of itself. But, if you really want something, usually there's a
That's that. Let's end on that. Let's end on that. If you have a North Star goal,
yeah,
if you have a dream of doing this,
yeah,
there's got to be a way.
yeah.
Don't give up on it. Keep working on it.
Oh, that's been my
And the
life
struggles that
motto. Where there's a will, there's a way.
the struggles we just went through in the last 10 minutes of how do we whatever are real, and I know a lot of people are going through them. If
Yeah,
you have a North Star goal, figure out what you need to do, even if it's one step, one tiny little thing every day,
yeah,
get to that point.
yeah,
And it may not be the place you think it's right now. It may be a place nearby. It could be wherever, but
yeah,
keep looking for that
yeah.
to get to safety. So thank you for being here. Thank you for
Thanks for
doing
having me.
this.
This was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for the book. And we'll
Yeah.
chat again maybe in 6 months or so and see how we're doing.
Well, I hope I'll see you before then, but yes.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.